Okay, so welcome to this really short overview of copyright and fair use, one of the best practices. I honestly don't have the number. It's number 25, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll add that to the list. Thanks for joining, everybody. We're going to spend about 30 minutes going through some of the basics of copyright and fair use, and also give you some extra resources on where you can find out more information. To start out with, does anybody have any burning questions, or, do you want to, why did you even sign up for this workshop, I guess is what I'd like to know.
One thing I always wonder is I have a feeling maybe I'm not supposed to do this, but I do it. So I have my online class, and then, for instance, we just did 3 weeks on coagulation. So there was a chapter in a book that I've got electronically that I used as one of my lectures. So I did lecture based off of this chapter, but I did make the chapter available. So I don't know if that's okay to do. Probably stop recording. Stop recording.
I will edit that carefully out. No, a lot of people do that, and it is not okay. So we'll
Okay.
talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about why it's not okay, and we'll talk about what the motivation for all these different rules and regulations are too. Heather, how
Okay.
about you? Do you have any perfect motivational, what did you come into this workshop hoping to get?
So there was one of the objectives I'm just looking at right now. It said best practices for citing and attributing sources and course materials. I was just interested in listening to that to see if there was anything that I didn't know about it.
Okay, great. So we will definitely cover that as well. Just to get started, we're going to talk about what copyright does. We're going to talk about fair use and whether or not it is actually does give us permission to use everything, everywhere, anytime we want. We're going to talk about understanding the difference between those things and the variations between those things. And we're going to talk about how to balance those things so that we don't get into trouble. Basically, as we all know, copyright is a form of intellectual property protection. It's granted to anybody who has created anything ever. And it doesn't have to be filed in a copyright office for it to exist. So even the minute I put pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, fingers to paintbrush, whatever I create in my personhood is automatically copyrighted. Okay, all the time. Most people aren't particularly they don't particularly care about copyright unless they're in the business of selling their work, right? I write stuff all the time. I don't copyright it. Take it if you want it. I'm all about open resources. But when you've invested a tremendous amount of time and energy into creating something, you would prefer not to have everybody and their brother steal your stuff, right? You guys create papers and research materials and infographics and course materials and lectures and all that. Obviously, you want that material protected on your side as well. It covers anything, anywhere that's ever been written or created. It gives copyright holders the exclusive right. They're the only ones that have the right to reproduce, distribute, perform, display, and create derivative works, unless permission is directly given. In most cases, copyright lasts about the life of the author plus about 70 years. So, you can freely use something from Shakespeare, but you don't have to ask for permission. But if it was something written in gosh, I'm dating myself now because I was automatically thinking the 1900s, but actually stuff in the 1900s is now open and fair use. But if anything that's within the author's lifetime plus 70 years, you should ask permission. We often talk about fair use, and we think that because we're an educational institution, we have free reign because, oh, we're nonprofit, we're educational. That's kind of true, but there are four doctrines that govern fair use, and those cover the purpose and character of the use. So, what are you using it for? The nature of the copyrighted work. So, is it factual or is it creative? Is it, is it educational? What is it and what is it for? The amount and substantiality of the use. How much of the use are you using? How much of the work are you using? How much of the content do you want to put in? That's where that adding a chapter of a book into a course goes against fair use because it's a big portion of that author's creation. And then the biggest one, and the reason why it's in orange is because to me, this is the one that really forms the basis of most of it. Is there an effect on the potential money-making impact to the author? And that's, Lori, where your example of, can I just upload a chapter of a book? No, because that means that the students aren't going to go out and buy that book, which is going to significantly impact the revenue that the author generates based on that book. So that's one of the biggest reasons, and that's probably the biggest reason that creators object to people using their stuff without asking. Any questions about that so far? Go ahead, Lori.
So, can I use one page of it? Is that something when you're talking about the amount and substantiality? If there's
That's a
chart,
really good question. There's no, and that's a myth that a lot of people reach to, oh, I read somewhere online that you can use up to 10% of a work. And that's actually not true. The best thing to do is to ask the author, can I use this work? Can I use a piece of this work in a course that I'm teaching? 9 times out of 10, if the author has control of their content, they will say yes, right? When we run into trouble is when publishing houses are involved, because publishers absolutely are not going to let you do that. And they're going to say, well, no, but here's a link to our content where students can buy it. So you're better off to either take the work and transform it yourself into something that can be used, or B, find another resource that says essentially the same thing that is an open educational resource. Does that make sense?
So how do you know it's open? Yeah, but how do you know it's open educational? For instance,
ooh, that's a great question. Go
there's
ahead.
stuff online, and there's PDFs of, for instance, because I do blood banking, the Antigen Fact Book.
Yep.
You can actually find it. But I guess if I don't put it into mine, if students find it and want to use it, I guess, what can you say? But how do you know?
When that's and truly that's one of the biggest questions out there, because it is challenging to know. That's where it's important to remember that everything is copyrighted. The minute it's created, it's copyrighted. So assume that there's copyright if you see it online. Even if it's there as a PDF and it's in a million different places, and for God's sakes, anybody can look this up. Why do I have to be so protective? The reason that you have to be protective of it is because if somebody were to go after, if the author were to discover that you were using something that they created without having asked permission, the university isn't at fault. The user is at fault, and the author could go after the user. So you, as a faculty member, could be held responsible in a legal sense for using content without permission. And that happens pretty much daily at different universities across the world. In fact, there was an episode, this was years ago now, but there was an episode where I think it was the University of Southern California had to take down every single one of their videos because they had used one thing in those videos that was copyrighted. And whoever wrote it found it and said, I'm taking you to court. You're using my stuff. You didn't get permission. And it was a big deal. I'd have to look into the case law and be able to find it. And I'm not a lawyer, by the way, at all, but I just happen to be very interested in this because it's so fascinating to see how people use these laws. So that's a really important thing to remember, is that you as a faculty member are responsible for this. The students, if they use copyrighted materials, are responsible, and they could be taken to court if they're using information in a way that's not appropriate.
So here's
Any other
the other
questions
thing.
before?
Yeah, so probably what you would recommend is just going and finding a book, or recommending the library purchase a book that they can make available for the students. And if it's electronic, is it possible for them to get like some kind of a license so they can share the book with more than one person?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And you can also you can also talk to the library at any point, because they can source materials much more effectively than we can, and they can find licensed copies that they can then just disperse into the community. So that takes you off the hook. And as long as you're providing links to content and not the actual content, you're also covered. because you're not providing the content. You're just linking to some place that provides the content. So if a database has the content, it presumably they've, the author would have given permission for that database to have it. And therefore, somebody that links to that database and accesses it through the database using Rush's credentials to have access to the database, you're covered. So it's not about not being able to use it. It's about making sure that you're using it in a way that's legal and fair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That was very helpful. Any other questions? All right, let's keep going here. So we talked about the example of using a book chapter. People often, and this is a very short list, by the way, because I want you guys to offer some examples as well, if you have any. But like quoting a text for criticism, using clips of film for teaching, reproducing a limited portion of a work for research purposes. Those are some things that could be covered, right? Because you do have the ability to use content in some cases. So if you're writing a paper and you're taking a piece of content and you're going to make an argument against it or for it, that's different than if you're using that piece of content to say, here's a piece of content, please take it and go away, right? Does that make sense? Same thing if you're using a clip of a film to talk about it in class, that's okay. It's really murky though. And so my recommendation is, as much as possible, use resources that you know are free and open for everybody to use. One of the things that people do, and I like this person because I spent my early career just crossing my fingers and hoping that I wouldn't get caught. I'm going to be honest, I am a felon when it comes to copyright infringement, because not now, but back in the day when I didn't know better, if I saw a picture on the internet, who's going to know? I'm going to take that. And then I learned, and I was, now I feel like I need to make amends to people, but I'll leave that for my next life. Common misconceptions are things that, oh shoot, I missed my slide. Let me just switch screens here, because this is actually, I was going to embed this and I didn't get a chance. I apologize, but let me just pull this up. There are some pretty common myths versus reality. Some of those are that if you use 30 seconds or less, you're covered. But in fact, there is no set time limit. Fairness depends on many of the different factors that we've talked about. Another myth is that any educational use is automatically fair use, which is absolutely not true. Educational use will be in your favor, but it does not guarantee fair use. Giving credit is all I need to do. I lived under that myth for a long, long time. Well, if I cited it, then I'm fair. It helps for sure, but it does not negate the copyright infringement if the author creator decides that he or she absolutely wants to pursue something. And another big one is that, we're nonprofit, therefore we have free reign. And again, it's just one element that they look at. And I think that's where people get really confused and frustrated and discouraged with copyright and fair use, because it's so nuanced. Every single copyright case is case by case, use by use, all the way up to, all the way up to the Supreme Court. So you can't have blanket statements about what it means to be nonprofit, what it means to be to give credit, etc. This is the one we talked about earlier, where if I found it online, it's good, it's free, it's available. Because the internet is the internet, it actually is probably the opposite. If it's up online and just freely out there, it's probably because somebody stole it and put it up there. Much like you can find your exams online, you can find anything online, right? And so being online is not a harbinger of good faith. And then the 10% rule, like we talked about, is just using little bits and pieces of it means that you're not really stealing it. And actually, no, that's not true either anymore. Basically, the misconceptions come down to the complexity, as we were talking about earlier. So it's really, and I'll send this infographic out to everybody. Basically, the level and depth of the layers surrounding copyright law is, we have a whole department of legal scholars at Rush who help us make decisions about what's copyrighted and what's not. So don't think that because you don't know, you're somehow deficient. It's almost impossible for the average bears like us to know all the time what's free and clear or not. So when you're thinking about using materials, you want to first be very careful about whether or not it's fair use. And if it is fair use, be prepared, think it through, and does it meet those criteria that we talked about earlier? You always, of course, want to respect student and patient privacy, no matter what you put up anywhere. And that one's not even really a copyright issue, but I just put it in there because it's so important on so many different levels that it belongs in every list. Respecting the copyright limitations, what you can do and what you can't do. Obviously, giving proper attribution and citing. There are so many citation machines out there. Do you guys use citation helpers? So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end because I think that'll make your life easier too. And then using and creating open educational resources, and that's a really big one. How many in the group here? How many people have used open educational resources or know what they are?
I'm not sure I know what they are.
Okay,
I'm
so
not
that's
guessing that
first
what
of
you
all,
guys give us. When you give us, I'm guessing.
It's an open educational resources, OER, is basically anything that you find that's uploaded to these databases that people upload and say, yes, you can use this. This is good to go. Things like Merlot, OER Commons is another one. Merlot is a huge one. UNESCO has a whole bunch. I mean, different organizations have different sections on their websites where they offer open educational resources. One of my favorite ones to use is Merlot, not the wine grape, but the Merlot database. And again, this is not, this isn't the subject of the workshop, but we'll just do a quick little tour of it. If you wanted to, let me see if my account is still valid. It looks like it is. It is. Look at that. How about that? I'm going to close that. I haven't been here for a while, but Lori or Heather or anybody else, give me a topic of something that you might want to look for an open educational resource for.
Coagulation
And you want that to be targeted in the health sciences?
in blood banking.
In blood banking, okay.
Yeah, in blood banking.
And the narrower your search, the narrower your results will be, but hopefully we'll see something. And in this case, it didn't. So let's look at other libraries. Okay, so this has got some stuff because a lot of these are going to send you to other materials which will give you the copyright information on those other sites. So this is a database. It's not that's all it is a database. But a lot of the materials on here will be open educational resources. Let's go back and just do blood banking coagulation and see if we get wider results. And there we go. We got some animations. We got some, looks like some PDFs.
So anything on here you can use then?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. And it will always tell you more information. And if there is a copyright on it, you'll be able to find it. And it will tell you, like in this case, this one says it's Creative Commons. And we'll talk about Creative Commons in a minute as well. But this work is licensed under an attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives 3.0 United States. So it's licensed in the United States. You have to give attribution to the person who created it, which in this case is the Open Educational Consortium. And you can't change it. You're not allowed to, and it has to be non-commercial use. So as long as you're using it in that context and you post the Creative Commons license on your work, you can use it. It's good to go. That's a beautiful thing.
So I just have to go back to this because I'm actually pulling it up on my screen. How did you do this then? You put in, so I said I wanted to do coagulation. And then you had to do something else because nothing came up. So what was the other?
I had originally up coagulation and blood banking, and that didn't produce any results. So instead I went to blood banking, or I went to coagulation without blood banking, and it pulled up all these different.
Okay.
Okay. And then once I found a resource that I thought I might like, I went to more information, and down at the bottom, they have all of the information about whether or not, what are the particulars in terms of disseminating the information. So in this case, there is no Creative Commons license. So I would be hesitant to use this without reaching out to the author. In this case, this list of people here. And what's nice is I have an email right here. So I can click on that email. And theoretically, of course, it's probably opening up in another window that's just not popping up.
Yeah.
Anyway, this would allow me to email. Let me see if I can get it here. Yeah, this is their email here. So I could then just copy and paste that into an email and say, hey, I found this resource. I really want to use it in my class. Are you okay with that? And they'll come back to you and probably say, yes, absolutely, or no, please contact these people or whatever. All right, let's jump back because we're going to run out of time. Otherwise, I have to be mindful
That
of
was
time.
excellent. You helped me out with something.
Okay, great. I'm glad. And then the last point on this slide is really just get permission. Like we just talked about, the easiest thing in the world is find the author's name, email them, because they almost always have an email contact, get permission from them, and keep those permissions in a file in your desktop somewhere. Just, get it in writing so that in case anybody ever asks, you can say, oh, no, I asked for that. Here it is. And it's kind of fun because then you establish relationships with people as well. Let's talk a little bit about generative AI. And I only have 5 minutes left, so I want to be really careful. But basically, there are some big issues with copyright and generative AI. Generative AI, in and of itself, may reproduce copyrighted material, right? Because it was trained on other people's work. It may also be a question that you want to also think about data privacy. Anytime you upload anything into an AI, it becomes a part of the AI. And so as you upload more and more information, if that information is incorrect, it's going to add an incorrect element to the AI training data, right? And that's happening across the globe. As people are using AIs constantly, that training data can be getting cloudy. I talk about plagiarism detection only to say that it doesn't work. Don't even think about it. It's not worth it. It's just a pain in the neck, and it causes a lot of problems. In terms of accessibility issues, I feel that AI tools create barriers for students. And so that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with copyright per se, but everything is related tangentially when it comes to copyright, right? Because we're creating learning resources using an AI that then may or may not be accessible to students. So we have to be mindful of that. Bias and discrimination, intellectual property, that's a big one. Who owns what goes up into an AI? I don't know. ChatGPT thinks they own everything, don't they? And that's kind of a big problem. So we want to be careful about that. And then, of course, malpractice concerns. If, as we're teaching people using AI tools, if the information in that AI tool is not accurate, then that will disseminate through the student body. So again, not directly related to copyright, related to generative AI, which in turn relates to copyright. So I just bring it up as a tangential issue. We have a tremendous number of Rush resources, and I've linked them all here. These are links. So when I send out the post-session information, you'll have links to all of these things. But Rush Library and Rush Legal they have amazing resources put together for us already, right? Here's Rush Legal. They will even answer questions and help you deal with copyright issues. So if you have questions, reach out to them, right? They've got the absolute law from the United States. They've got American Library Association. There's all of these different uses. This Fair Use Evaluator is another good one that I really liked. Tons of stuff in there. And then there's the Rush Library, of course, also a really good source for copyright information, copyright infringement information, licensing and accessing, practical steps. I thought this one was really helpful because it tells you what you can do to keep yourself safe, right? And this covers a lot more than what I have time to do within this really short presentation. So those are some basic resources that you have. I encourage all of you to use them. And then finally, just remember that by staying informed on your side with what's legal, what's not legal, you can absolutely stay on the good side of using the most up-to-date information while still protecting yourself and the interest of the author slash creator. Questions, comments, issues, complaints, wants, needs, desires. The floor is yours. We have about 30 seconds left. Was this helpful, not helpful? Do you have other things you want me to target?
This was super helpful, and it's really good because then I can also defer some of the student questions to the links that you gave me. So if they've got,
Absolutely.
questions about when they're writing the paper, or even like one of the things I have trouble with is like short answers on, and I actually called out a couple students on a recent exam. And I said, this sounds an awful lot like you used AI.
Oh,
And
that's a big one, yeah.
and she said, oh, I was just trying to be really clear. I said, all you have to do is you can use it, but put it in your own words. Express that you understand what I am asking you for. That's kind
And citing AI.
of
And that's
citing AI. Yep.
you've got to cite it, right? If you're going to use AI, that's fine, but be open about your use of AI and be clear about how you used AI. It's very different. If I'm a student and I ask Claude a question or ChatGPT a question and take the answer verbatim and pop it into a paper and send it to my professor, I'm not using AI appropriately.
Yeah.
But if I use AI to formulate a response and then critically think about the response and update the response with my own perspectives, my own ideas, why wouldn't we want students to do that? Right?
So
Because then they're not only thinking about it, they're
yeah.
actually building on it.
How would you cite it? Would you just say I use ChatGPT or Claude or Poe or at the date and the time or something, or what? Or how would you cite that appropriately?
Well, and here's exactly I love the LibGuides from Purdue, right? They have a whole section on how to cite AI generated content. And I'll send this link to, in fact, I'll put this link in the chat for y'all right now. But you can see that, here's our example. Here's
Yeah.
what the student was writing, and to cite it, they just use the OpenAI 2023, and then on the reference page, they put this. And oftentimes, as a professor, one of the things that I like to do is I will have my students submit another document with the paper or an addendum to the paper that they're doing, asking them to explain to me how you used AI. What was your prompt? What was your response? What was the response? How did you modify the response? Because in that way, then I'm not only am I trusting that they're going to do that, but I'm verifying that that's what they did. And I don't want to give myself more work by, having to now track down their AI use, but I do want them to think about their AI use. I want them to understand that what they're doing, it has consequences.
So I know you're kind of over time, but so you just ask the students just to provide the prompt and how they used AI.
Well, what I do, and it depends on the assignment, right? But part of my assignments in some cases have been to, ask, in fact, I'll even direct them to use AI. Using AI, create an answer to this question. Show me your prompting pattern, like what prompts did you use to get to the answer that you finally got to? How did you copy that prompt, and then how did you change that prompt? Or how did you change the output rather
And
to
how?
reflect what you wanted to say? So it's sort of a short reflection on how they used AI in their work.
Yeah.
And I do believe that as students become more comfortable with AI, and as we become more comfortable with AI, that will become second nature to us, just like citation is now.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Laura, for those extra and poor Laura, she tried to talk, but her mic wasn't working. Oh. And she was talking about the use of protected creative work and how it may potentially deprive creatives of income on their own work. Absolutely. Still very murky. Absolutely. Bronca needs to run. Thank you very much for that extra link, Laura. Disclosure statements are also a good idea. Yes. So with that, I tried to keep it within 30 minutes. What other questions do you have? If you want to meet about anything else, oh, sorry, I cut somebody off.
No, I was just gonna say, no, you gave me some good information beyond what I was expecting to get today. So thank
Oh,
you.
well, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I appreciate your time. I will send out a follow-up with the deck and with the recording and all of that stuff, as well as the links that we pulled up today and a little brief overview of Merlot.
Thank
Anything
you.
else anybody would like to talk about while and I'll stop recording now so we can just talk freely.